Around the world, colossal structures are rising that are reshaping the way we live. These projects emerge in places where construction once seemed impossible, forming environments so extreme they appear to exist only in imagination. Other structures span vast oceans, cut straight through solid mountain ranges, or rise skyward, becoming powerful statements of human vision and will. They stand as symbols of ambition, innovation, and an unrelenting drive to push beyond every limit. In this journey, we will explore extraordinary megaprojects across the globe, engineering marvels that leave humanity in awe and redefine what humans are truly capable of building. Port of Los Angeles does not resemble a destination, but rather a colossal machine that breathes. Spanning an area comparable to a mid-sized city, this port operates day and night with precise rhythm, where even a single minute of delay can ripple into a chain reaction across the entire supply network of the United States. Structurally, this is an almost entirely man-made space. Shipping channels are dredged deep to receive the largest container vessels, while terminals are organized by absolute industrial logic. Everything prioritizes load capacity, speed, and safety, leaving no room for decorative excess. The landscape here carries a cold, mechanical beauty. Towering cranes move slowly yet with precision. Containers stack like blocks of physical data. At night, industrial lighting turns the port into a different kind of city, built not for living, but for circulation. Walking along the Port of Los Angeles feels like standing backstage in modern life. There are no tourist symbols, only movement, discipline, and the weight of the material world silently passing through. Songdo International Business District was created on reclaimed sea land, where solid ground, people, and urban memory once did not exist. The entire city was designed from drawings, not grown organically, not shaped gradually by time. Beneath every road lies a multi-layered artificial foundation, strong enough to support a constantly operating modern metropolis. Songdo was not born from history, but from the ambition to control living space. Everything here runs on logic rather than emotion. Trash does not require collection trucks, but disappears through underground pipe systems. Data flows more than people, from sensors and cameras to smart infrastructure. Streets are wide, straight, and so clean that human movement feels small amid massive architecture. Songdo's landscape carries a beauty that is precise and cold. Glass, steel, water, and light reflect into one another, creating the sensation of a simulated model rather than real life. At night, the city resembles a science fiction set operating in silent mode. Songdo places humans in the role of observers of their own future, where the question is not, is it convenient to live here, but do we truly belong in a city this perfect? Port of Singapore is where globalization becomes most visibly physical. Millions of containers carry no individual stories, yet when stacked together, they form the continuous pulse of world trade, where time is measured in minutes rather than days. What is unusual is that this port operates with minimal direct human presence. Remotely controlled cranes, autonomous vehicles, and algorithms decide the paths of massive steel blocks, turning potential chaos into near absolute order. Visually, the Port of Singapore makes no effort to impress. By day, it is layers of precisely stacked containers. By night, a grid of steady industrial lights, creating the sense of a city that exists solely to serve movement. Standing before the port is not a relaxing experience. It is the moment one realizes that modern power lies not in weapons or resources, but in the ability to organize the flow of the world. La Défense exists as a paradox within France, where economic power is placed outside historical space. This area did not grow from old streets, but was planned like a post-war machine, created to rebuild national status through concrete, glass, and absolute straight axes. La Défense does not inherit memory, it deliberately stands apart from memory. Space here is organized by layers, with people moving above while traffic and infrastructure are pushed below. This vertical separation creates an atmosphere of order that feels cold, where every movement follows a defined route. Hundreds of thousands of people come to work here every day, yet very few truly live here. Visually, La Défense carries a sharp and precise beauty. Towering architectural blocks reflect one another, turning light into part of the structure itself. At night, the space becomes surreal, like a city still operating, but largely devoid of human presence. La Défense forces people to slow their steps within vast open spaces, not to admire scenery, but to recognize the smallness of the individual within a city built purely for power and efficiency. Hudson Yards did not rise from empty land, but was built entirely on a massive structural platform covering active rail tracks. The city does not expand its territory. Instead, it stacks the future onto the past, turning forgotten space into an urban asset worth tens of billions of dollars. Here, architecture is not meant to tell historical stories, but to display economic power. Towering glass volumes, reflective surfaces, and bold forms create the sensation of entering a reset version of New York, where everything feels new, clean and tightly controlled. Hudson Yards operates like a miniature city, its own energy systems, its own infrastructure, and a rhythm of life set apart. This absolute convenience makes it highly efficient, yet controversial, as it is often seen as a space designed primarily for the ultra-wealthy and major corporations. Walking through this district, visitors are not pulled into the familiar chaos of New York. What emerges instead is a sense of cold precision and distance, like observing a future model of urban life where the city runs flawlessly, but people must ask whether they truly belong within it. Port of Hamburg exists as a geographic paradox, located more than 60 miles inland, yet welcoming container ships weighing hundreds of thousands of tons. The river becomes a living corridor, where tides and humans must coordinate down to the minute to keep this massive machine running. More than 8 centuries ago, the port shaped Europe's open trade mindset. From goods to people to ideas, everything passes through here like layers of historical sediment. A single container placed incorrectly can trigger a domino effect, slowing an entire global chain. At night, the port appears as a glowing industrial city where cranes rise like watchtowers and cargo ships drift silently past. This is not poetic beauty, but the beauty of weight and discipline. Some travelers come not to admire scenery, but to watch the world operate. Sitting on a boat among massive hulls, one realizes that travel can be about understanding the invisible flows that sustain the world. Canary Wharf did not grow from historic streets or ancient squares, but from a radical urban rebirth. What was once a massive port complex in the 19th century was almost entirely abandoned before being reshaped into a modern financial center, clearly separated from the rest of London. In spatial terms, Canary Wharf is a world of glass, steel, and order. Tall towers rise closely together, reflecting onto former dockwaters preserved from the port era, creating a landscape that feels both cold and precise, where architecture dominates over human presence. Few people notice that beneath this modern surface lies a complex underground network, allowing movement, shopping, and transportation to operate almost continuously. The city above functions in parallel with another city below. Walking through Canary Wharf creates the sensation of entering a different London, where financial rhythms shape space and silence itself can become the most memorable experience. Brasilia is not a city that grew over time, but a capital built almost entirely within just a few years, as if someone placed a massive blueprint in the heart of Brazil. From the very beginning, this place did not aim for spontaneity, but pursued order and a clear political will. The entire city is organized into a form recognizable from the air, turning space into a visual concept rather than a place of organic daily life. Buildings do not cluster tightly, but stand apart within vast, empty spaces, creating a feeling that is both monumental and distant, more like an open-air museum than a lively city. Modern architecture, with soft curves, is used to soften the rigidity of concrete, yet social life does not fully mirror that external gentleness. The city prioritizes vehicles, order, and distance, making walking an intentional rather than instinctive experience. In Brasilia, travel is not about seeking familiar emotions, but about observing an urban experiment. What happens when humans attempt to design their own way of living in advance? Putrajaya was born not from markets or old streets, but from an absolute administrative blueprint. This city was entirely planned from scratch to carry the role of a center of power, where order is placed above spontaneity and space is designed before human rhythm. About 1/3 of its area is dedicated to water surfaces and green spaces, making the city feel more like a vast park than a workplace. Artificial lakes are not only visual elements, but tools to separate functions and soften authority through landscape. Architecture here carries a modern Islamic spirit. Clear forms, strong symmetry, bright materials, and clean surfaces. There is no overlap, no advertising clutter, no visual chaos. Everything appears positioned exactly where it was intended. Walking through Putrajaya feels like entering a working model, where people are not swept along by crowds but are compelled to slow down and observe how power is translated into lived space. Port of Rotterdam does not impress with scenery, but with the feeling that this is where Europe operates in silence. As the continent's largest seaport, it handles hundreds of millions of tons of cargo each year, enough to make the idea of scale feel abstract. Here, the sea is not just a boundary, but a component of a precisely controlled system. What is unusual lies in its artificial geography. Large parts of the port are built on reclaimed land, existing below natural sea level, yet remaining safe through dikes, pumps, and water management algorithms. Rotterdam does not adapt to the environment. It reconstructs the environment to serve economic goals. The landscape therefore feels cold and exact. Containers are stacked into geometric blocks. Cranes and autonomous vehicles move with minimal human presence. At night, industrial lights turn the port into a city of machines. At Port of Rotterdam, the experience does not come from sightseeing, but from realizing the backstage of the modern world, a place where everything must be on time, in position, and never driven by emotion. Putrajaya was born not from markets or old streets, but from an absolute administrative blueprint. This city was entirely planned from scratch to carry the role of a center of power, where order is placed above spontaneity and space is designed before human rhythm. About 1/3 of its area is dedicated to water surfaces and green spaces, making the city feel more like a vast park than a workplace. Artificial lakes are not only visual elements, but tools to separate functions and soften authority through landscape. Architecture here carries a modern Islamic spirit. Clear forms, strong symmetry, bright materials, and clean surfaces. There is no overlap, no advertising clutter, no visual chaos. Everything appears positioned exactly where it was intended. Walking through Putrajaya feels like entering a working model, where people are not swept along by crowds but are compelled to slow down and observe how power is translated into lived space. Nouvelle Route du Littoral was not created to be beautiful, but to survive. This road is built directly over the ocean instead of clinging to cliffs like the old route, which once suffered deadly rockfalls and crashing waves. Here, the choice was not between comfort and cost, but between safety and risk. Its structure resembles a maritime engineering project more than a road. Massive pillars are anchored into the sea, bearing traffic loads, wave forces, and constant salt corrosion. Every foot of roadway exists through precise calculation, because even a small error can be amplified into disaster. The landscape is therefore both overwhelming and tense. On one side lies the open ocean with no protection. On the other, the steep mass of land. While moving, people do not admire the sea, but physically feel its power beneath the wheels. Passing along the Nouvelle Route du Littoral is a singular experience, not a relaxing journey, but a moment when humans become acutely aware that they coexist with nature through engineering and carefully controlled risk. Istanbul Airport was created not merely to receive and dispatch aircraft, but to become a true global transit point. From its initial planning, the airport was positioned as a crossroads between continents, where international flows of people constantly pass through without truly stopping. The scale of Istanbul Airport goes beyond ordinary perception. Its interior spaces are so vast that passengers move as if inside a self-contained city, where human movement, flight operations, and services run in parallel under an almost invisible order. The airport's architecture is not purely technical. Large domed roofs inspired by Ottoman heritage give the transit space the character of a public square where modernity and tradition coexist within the same rhythm. The experience at Istanbul Airport lies not in arrival or departure, but in the sensation of standing within global motion, where time is measured by human flow, and every step belongs to a different journey. Taipei 101 is not only 1,667 feet tall, but is also designed to move with nature rather than resist it. Inside the tower hangs a 660-ton tuned mass damper that acts like a balancing brain, helping the structure remain stable amid strong winds and seismic forces. The building's architecture is inspired by stacked bamboo segments, symbolizing resilient growth in East Asian culture, while also serving as a structural solution that disperses force vertically. Each level is not only functional, but actively participates in the load-bearing system, turning the entire tower into a single, unified organism. From hundreds of feet above the ground, the city below no longer appears as streets and buildings, but as a massive electrical circuit. People standing there often feel smaller, not from fear of height, but from realizing the ordered mechanics of urban life. Here, the experience is not about conquering height, but about standing inside a structure that quietly sways to protect everyone within it. Beijing Daxing International Airport appears like a gigantic organism set across the plains, where architecture is no longer a shell, but a nervous system controlling human flow. The entire terminal is gathered into a single structure, eliminating the sense of fragmentation common to large airports. Its radial form is not meant to overwhelm, but to shorten every step a passenger takes. The interior space operates through pure logic. Natural light penetrates deep into the core. Curved ceilings guide movement, and every visual axis remains open. The airport does not force people to search for direction, but subtly leads them forward without conscious effort. In terms of sensation, Daxing is unusually calm. Passenger flows are evenly distributed, without compression, making its immense scale feel smooth and controlled. The architecture does not display power through height, but through continuity and precision. Walking through the terminal feels like entering a compact city where waiting is no longer empty time, but an experience of observing how a modern system quietly organizes human movement. Changi Airport was not created to serve fast movement, but to make people forget that they are inside an airport. From its very concept, this structure reverses transportation logic. Instead of minimizing waiting time, it transforms waiting into an experience worth staying for. The circular glass roof directs every gaze toward the center, where nature takes the leading role. Greenery, flowing water, and natural light are not decorative elements, but emotional infrastructure, shifting the space from transit mode into relaxation. Changi Airport blurs the boundary between infrastructure and urban life. People who are not flying still come here to walk, sit, and observe. A transportation facility that functions as public space is a rare phenomenon in contemporary architecture. Walking through this indoor forest, visitors no longer feel rushed. What replaces urgency is slowness, curiosity, and a rhythm detached from schedules, as if this airport is quietly teaching people how to wait in a more humane way. HS2 is not a railway line, but a sharp turn in how humans measure distance. Designed for speeds of nearly 224 miles per hour, HS2 compresses journeys that once took hours into dense sequences of minutes, where time is pressed thin like metal under industrial force. The paradox is that more than half of this route runs underground. Massive tunnels drilled by machines weighing thousands of tons cut through ancient geological layers, while the surface above remains calm. Technology here learns how to hide rather than show itself. Above ground, HS2 stations are not built as stations, but as open spaces of a new century. Light, emptiness, and movement are calculated so people do not merely pass through, but linger, observe, and feel the pulse of a future taking shape. HS2 therefore feels like an invisible corridor. Standing near it, you do not hear history being erased, but sense how modernity is learning to step lightly across the past. Port of Antwerp is not located by the sea, yet it is where ships weighing hundreds of thousands of tons sail deep inland, as if the ocean itself were pulled into the continent. Nearly 49.7 miles from the coast, this place does not slow down. Instead, it becomes a strategic choke point of Europe, where natural geography is bent by human engineering. The space here has no clear horizon. Containers stack in layers, cranes move endlessly, and industrial lights cover everything day and night. Nothing is designed to be admired, only to function. Fast, precise, stripped of emotion. One small delay can send shockwaves through global supply chains. Behind its mechanical exterior flows immense value. Goods worth hundreds of billions of euros pass through each year, from everyday items to objects that shape economic power. Every container is like a sealed secret, compact, yet capable of carrying value millions of times greater than its weight. At Port of Antwerp, the experience does not come from romance, but from standing before a living machine. It reveals that the modern world is not powered by beautiful scenery, but by the silent rhythm of steel, water, and time. Vancouver Broadway Subway project was created not to showcase scale, but to resolve an urban bottleneck that had reached its limit. When surface transportation was pushed beyond its carrying capacity, going underground became the only remaining systemic option. What stands out is that this underground line was built beneath a city operating at full pace. Tunnel boring technology that controls vibration and ground settlement was deployed to preserve life above, making construction almost invisible to passers-by. Spatially, the stations do not seek to impress. Compact, low-profile, and neutral designs allow them to blend into the streetscape, giving priority to the steady, punctual, and predictable flow of people. At times, while waiting for a train, one realizes this is more than transportation infrastructure. It is how a city chooses to quietly repair itself through precise engineering and patience measured in decades. Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor is not a city, but a stretch of territory designed to operate an economy. Spanning over 932 miles, this corridor links two power poles of India, turning the space between them into a continuous system of production and logistics, where geography is no longer a barrier but a technical foundation. What makes it unusual lies in its mindset. Cities are not born from communities, but from supply chains. A dedicated freight railway runs parallel to highways, completely separated from civilian traffic. Transport time is calculated with the precision of an assembly line, not by spontaneous rhythms of daily life. The landscape, therefore, carries a strange silence. Massive factories stand in open space, straight roads extend to the edge of sight, everything orderly to a degree unfamiliar to traditional images of India. This is a space created to work, not to tell stories. Passing through the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor feels like watching the future test itself. Without check-in spots, it allows observers to see how a densely populated nation chooses engineering and planning to shape its path of development. Gotem appears like a fragment of the future placed inside a layered reality. With a speed of about 99 miles per hour, this rail line does not aim to break records, but to compress distances that were once stretched by urban sprawl and dependence on private cars. What stands out is how Gotem chooses to exist in space. Part of it runs elevated to avoid deep geological interference. Part hides underground, creating a sense of smooth and continuous motion. Silence is intentionally designed, making the journey feel more like a flow than a sprint. The stations take the form of new public spaces, glass-filled, light-rich, minimalist, and clean. There, public transport is no longer associated with impermanence, but becomes a choice with dignity. Riding Gotem is observing society through speed. Through the window, Different layers of life slide past without colliding, yet coexist within a rare shared rhythm of movement. The Trans-Siberian Railway is the longest railway line in the world, stretching nearly 5,780 miles and crossing 8 time zones in a single continuous journey. This immense length not only connects distant territories, but also stretches human perception of distance and time. The line runs through some of the most sparsely populated spaces on the planet, where northern forests extend for hundreds of miles without interruption. Straight tracks cut through repeating scenery to the point where the human eye struggles to distinguish beginning from end. The railway was constructed, starting in the late 19th century, under extremely limited technological conditions, relying largely on manual labor. Many sections were laid over permafrost, forcing engineers to continuously adapt the structure to maintain long-term stability. On board, passengers live for days within a slowly moving space where daily rhythms form independently from the outside world, and monotony itself becomes an unforgettable experience. Grand Inga Dam is the hydropower project with the greatest potential ever conceived by humanity, with a theoretical capacity exceeding 40,000 surpassing any power plant currently in operation. This energy comes from a river whose flow ranks among the strongest on the planet, where water force is compressed into an unusually short stretch. The Inga area possesses a unique topography with natural elevation differences concentrated in one zone, allowing electricity generation without the need for massive reservoirs. The current accelerates continuously, forming violent rapids where the water surface is almost never still. The idea of Grand Inga emerged in the mid-20th century, yet to this day, it exists only in drawings and multi-phase plans. The gap between its immense potential and real-world implementation has turned the project into a globally debated symbol. Here, the landscape is not defined by human-made structures, but by the sensation of raw energy waiting to be released, where nature and development ambitions stand in direct opposition. Lusail Stadium appears as a symbol created not only to host events, but to prove that humans can design structures that rise above harsh natural conditions. With a capacity of nearly 80,000 seats, it is the largest stadium ever built in the country and the focal point of one of the most watched sporting events on the planet. What leaves the strongest impression lies in its architecture. The overall form is inspired by traditional Arab lanterns combined with Islamic geometric patterns, creating an exterior that feels both modern and culturally profound. The metallic skin is not merely decorative, but plays a role in controlling light and energy. Inside, every detail is calculated through digital simulation. Crowd noise is retained, sightlines are optimized, and the movement of tens of thousands of people remains orderly and fluid. What is fascinating is that this structure does not end with sport. After major events, the space is reconfigured to serve community life, tourism, and experiences, turning the stadium into a living destination rather than a sleeping monument. Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is not just a dam, but a block of will made of concrete placed within the flow of history. With a capacity of about 6,000 MW, this structure was created not to impress visually, but to redefine how a nation controls energy and its own future. What makes GERD unusual lies in the scale of water being retained. A reservoir holding tens of billions of cubic feet transforms a natural flow into a system that can be calculated, where every operational decision carries meaning far beyond engineering. Here, hydropower does not only generate electricity, it creates choice. In form, GERD almost entirely rejects decorative language. Massive, straight, cold concrete walls place function above emotion. The surrounding landscape thus becomes a backdrop for a raw industrial statement. Standing before GERD is standing before the weight of control. Not a touristic sense of awe, but a rare experience of humans directly facing power that has been locked inside water. International Space Station has no fixed location, standing neither on land nor sea, but continuously drifting around Earth like a living object. It is a place where humans exist in a microgravity state, where the concept of standing still almost disappears, and every movement becomes an act of adaptation. Inside the station, architecture serves survival rather than aesthetics. The modules are assembled like a massive machine, where every pipe and control panel carries a life-critical function. Humans here do not walk, but float. Do not place objects down, but secure them to space. Through observation windows, Earth appears as a seamless sphere without borders or flags. This perspective makes all concepts of nations feel fragile, as the entire planet becomes a single moving landscape. Living on the International Space Station is not like tourism, but like a test of limits. The limits of the body, the mind, and humanity's ability to adapt when leaving the place where it was born. James Webb Space Telescope exists in a place with no ground to stand on, yet it is stable enough to serve as an ideal observation platform for humanity. Positioned at a gravitational balance point between Earth and the Sun, the telescope does not orbit our planet, but moves with Earth like a shadow held steady in space. Webb's structure resembles a fragile, mechanical organism, a segmented mirror, a massive sun shield, and hundreds of precisely timed deployment steps all operate with no chance for correction. Port of Busan is not a place to look at, but a place to feel. Every year, more than 20 million containers pass through here, turning the port into a continuous material flow where time is not measured by day and night, but by international shipping schedules. Every minute, dozens of operational decisions happen silently, as precise as a living machine. The port's space is built on a logic of absolute efficiency. Cranes lift dozens of tons in just a few minutes. Warehouses are arranged so movement is never congested. This industrial architecture is not meant to impress visually, yet when night falls, the lights of cranes and ship hulls create a skyline that feels both cold and mesmerizing. Here, people do not stand before the sea to dream, but to work. Many have never left the city, yet every day they handle goods from all over the world. The port becomes an invisible intersection of economies, cultures, and human destinies. Stepping closer to the port, you are not greeted by tranquility. Instead, there is the sensation of standing beside a powerful global artery, where travel is not about relaxation, but about understanding how the world truly operates. SoFi Stadium appears as an architectural paradox, a massive stadium built deep below ground level, forcing people to descend in order to look up. From the very first moment, The experience here is no longer about watching, but about entering a living structure. The enormous transparent roof, built without support columns, breaks traditional construction logic. Natural light pours into the vast space, combined with a floating circular screen weighing over 1,000 tons, completely surrounding spectators with images and motion. Inside, every detail is calculated for massive crowds, sound without overlapping echoes, digital connectivity for hundreds of thousands of devices, and unobstructed sight lines from every seat. This is not a place to sit and watch, but a place to be pulled inside. Here, people do not come only for sports or music. They come to feel how technology, architecture, and emotion are arranged like a modern ritual. Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park opens like an urban paradox, a place once heavily polluted, now reborn from more than 2 million tons of contaminated soil, with 98% treated and reused on site. Instead of erasing the past, the land preserves its natural structure and water flows, turning industrial mistakes into foundations for the future. The green space here is not designed just to be admired. Over 45% of the area is dedicated to vegetation, water, and habitats, operating as a living system that absorbs carbon, filters water, and slows runoff during heavy rainfall. The park functions quietly like an ecological machine within the city. Architecturally and socially, most structures follow a temporary mindset. 90% can be dismantled or repurposed. Rather than monuments, they form a flexible framework that serves everyday urban life. Walking here feels like reading a map of the future, where people, nature, and industrial memory coexist without one overpowering the others. Silicon Valley is not a city, but a region where ideas are treated as the most valuable resource. Representing less than 1% of the United States population, this area attracts around 30 to 35% of global venture capital, proving that intellectual power can far exceed geographic scale. On the surface, the landscape appears ordinary. Low-rise buildings, wide roads, abundant greenery, and no skyline of towering skyscrapers. This apparent calm conceals an extreme density of thinking, where casual conversations often revolve around algorithms, artificial intelligence, or synthetic biology. Socially, more than 50% of the technology workforce was born outside the United States. Silicon Valley operates as a compressed global society where multiple cultures collide while sharing a common language of innovation. Here, the experience does not come from sightseeing, but from the sensation of standing very close to things that have not yet appeared on the world's map. CN Tower was created from a very practical need to solve television signal interference for a rapidly expanding metropolis. But from a purely technical structure, it rose into a symbol of height with a self-supporting concrete form over 800 feet tall, once challenging every construction limit of the 20th century. What makes CN Tower unusual lies in how it accepts movement. The tower is designed to sway slightly in strong winds, turning motion into part of its stability. The architecture does not fight nature, but learns to coexist with it through precise engineering calculations. From the observation levels, the landscape unfolds in layers. By day, the space below compresses into clear geometric patterns. By night, the city becomes a network of lights, making those above keenly aware of the distance between humans and the systems they create. Here, the experience is not just about looking down. Glass floors, outdoor walkways, and slowly rotating spaces force visitors to feel height through the body, through heartbeat, and through trust in science. Petronas Twin Towers opens with an unusual choice. Not one tower, but two. Two identical architectural forms stand side by side, built on foundation systems deeper than 328 feet, as if anchoring human ambition firmly into the ground before reaching for the sky. The shape of the structure is not purely modern. The entire floor plan is based on Islamic geometry, with the eight-pointed star motif repeated through layers of structure. Steel and glass are not only used to build upward, but to reflect light, turning the twin towers into surfaces that constantly change throughout the day. Between the two towers is a bridge that is not fully fixed, able to slide slightly when the structures move. This detail makes the place feel like an artificial ecosystem, where every component is allowed to move rather than resist nature. Stepping into this space, people do not only look up at height, they stand before an idea of balance, where engineering, culture, and the power of form exist at the same time. Bosco Verticale appears as a paradox of modern architecture. Two residential towers that contain more than 900 large trees, enough to form a forest lifted vertically into the sky. Here, nature does not surround the city, but pushes directly into human living space. Each balcony is designed like a real piece of land, capable of carrying soil, roots, and tree canopies. Trees are not planted for decoration, but carefully selected by height, wind exposure, and light, forcing architecture to follow biological logic rather than oppose it. From a distance, the building has no fixed face. Its colors shift with the seasons. Its shapes change as trees grow, making the entire structure resemble a living organism breathing within the city. Living near Bosco Verticale is not about escaping the city. It is an experience of observing how humans experiment with a new way of living, where housing no longer separates itself from nature, but becomes part of a functioning ecosystem. Helsinki Central Library UDI was conceived more as a social manifesto than a traditional library, a place where people are valued above books. From the very beginning, the project did not ask what citizens would read, but how they wanted to live, meet, and create together in a shared space. Architecturally, UDI deliberately avoids any sense of authority. There are no grand stairways or ceremonial gates, only wood, glass, and light, creating a feeling of openness and intimacy. More than 2,500 panels of local spruce wood provide both visual warmth and a welcoming atmosphere, reflecting Nordic design values. Inside, the classic silence of a library is replaced by a softer rhythm of life. Group work, technological experimentation, conversation, and rest. Over 2 million visitors come each year, many without borrowing books, yet still treating Udi as a familiar meeting place. At Udi, simply sitting, observing, and existing among others is considered a legitimate way of engaging with knowledge. Tesla Gigafactory Nevada emerges like an alien structure where industry does not avoid nature, but places itself directly in confrontation with it. The scale of the factory is vast enough to reshape how humans imagine a factory, no longer a supporting facility, but a central entity of the new energy era. Inside that colossal metallic mass, every movement follows a single logic. Materials flow in one direction. Batteries are born in a closed loop, and the energy created feeds back into sustaining the production line itself. This is not merely manufacturing, but a self-operating industrial ecosystem where efficiency is pushed to its absolute limit. The surrounding space is so empty that it makes humans feel small. That isolation forces technology to perfect itself, to adapt independently, and from there establish new global standards for the battery industry. Standing before this factory, the experience does not come from sightseeing, but from witnessing an idea in motion. Humanity can build the future anywhere, as long as it is bold enough. Moscow Big Circle Line was not built to impress, but to solve a critical problem: how a megacity can continue operating without suffocating itself. This massive circular line emerged as a new layer of infrastructure, allowing people to move around the city without passing through the old centers of power. With a length of about 43.5 miles and more than 30 stations, the line functions like an underground circulatory system. It disperses passenger flows, relieves pressure on older lines, and reorganizes urban rhythm toward fewer collisions. Everything is calculated to save time, energy, and the invisible fatigue of residents. What makes this line distinctive lies in its space: high ceilings, wide halls, heavy materials, and restrained lighting. There is no sense of haste, only rigor and precision, as if moving inside a colossal machine. The experience here is not entertainment-based. It feels like observing a city, revealing its true strength in the places few people ever see. Echo Atlantic is not a city that simply rose up, but a city that was deliberately created. More than 3.86 square miles of land were reclaimed directly from the ocean, with hundreds of millions of cubic feet of sand pumped in, turning a once violent sea surface into the foundation of a new urban dream. To keep that dream from being swallowed, a massive seawall was built, strong enough to confront some of the most powerful waves in the region. Beneath the ground, infrastructure systems were designed as a single whole from the very beginning, as if this city had never known the idea of patchwork fixes. The landscape here feels unsettlingly unique. Behind you rise modern architectural blocks, while in front of you stretches the open ocean. There is no buffer zone, no intermediary, only humanity and the sea standing face to face. Walking here, one does not feel the usual noise of a major metropolis. Instead, there is the sensation of moving through a prototype of the future, where humanity is testing how far it can go when it refuses to retreat before nature. Forest city Johor was born not from the mainland, but from the sea. Hundreds of millions of cubic feet of sand were reclaimed to form an artificial city spanning dozens of square miles, where every road, tower, and urban outline was drawn before residents ever arrived. From the beginning, this was a space designed in advance, not one that evolved naturally. The city was planned for around 700,000 people, yet for many years, most apartments remained unoccupied. Elevators still run, lights still glow, but everyday life is largely absent. Forest City thus became a textbook example of infrastructure arriving before community, where physical completeness outpaced real demand. Visually, the place carries a cold, precise beauty. Buildings align evenly, streets run straight, and glass surfaces mirror the surrounding water like a full-scale architectural model. Walking through this space, one can clearly feel a rare stillness for a modern city. Forest City is not meant for chasing excitement. It feels more like a pause for observation, a place to experience a city waiting to be lived in, and to understand that an urban space only truly exists when people fill it. Acropolis Restoration project is not an ordinary construction site, but a place where humans accept working more slowly than history itself. For decades, each ancient stone block has been dismantled, measured, and then reassembled with an almost cautious attitude, as if a single misstep could disturb memories spanning thousands of years. What makes it unusual lies in its restoration philosophy. No erasing traces, no hiding damage. Fragments, fractures, and imperfections are preserved as proof that architecture has a life of its own. Modern technology appears not to dominate, but to listen to the ancient structure. Amid scaffolding and cranes, the landscape becomes a rare cross-section of time. The past does not rest quietly in a museum. It is touched, adjusted, and rethought every single day. Here, the experience does not come from admiring a flawless symbol, but from witnessing how humans engage in dialogue with heritage while knowing they are only temporary passers-by in history. Port of Melbourne expansion is not a project meant to be admired, but a decision to keep an entire nation operating. Within a port space that is already near saturation, expansion does not move outward, but inward into capacity. Deeper shipping channels, longer berths, and faster handling systems. Every year, millions of containers pass through here before becoming food, materials, or everyday consumer goods. The port's expansion does not change the city's appearance, but quietly relieves pressure on the national supply chain, where even a small bottleneck can escalate into a major crisis. The landscape here is steel, concrete, cranes, and industrial lighting. There is no romance, only precise and continuous motion, like a colossal machine that is not allowed to stop. Standing at a distance, you do not see a tourist attraction, but the way the modern world maintains its rhythm through places that are almost never photographed. Dubai Internet City was not born to put on a show, but to operate. It is an urban district designed almost entirely for intellectual labor, where value does not lie in overwhelming scenery, but in the invisible decisions made every day. Since the late 20th century, this place has been imagined more as a technology campus than a conventional commercial center. The organization here is radically different. Buildings do not compete in height, but spread horizontally, prioritizing natural light, walkable paths, and short pauses for human thought. All digital infrastructure, from connectivity to energy management, was built as a unified system from the start, avoiding the patchwork logic of cities that grow gradually. The landscape follows an unusual rhythm. Daytime is unexpectedly quiet. Nighttime almost disappears, with no colored lights and no noise. This is a place where silence itself is considered a working condition. Walking through Dubai Internet City feels like stepping backstage in the digital world, where you do not see power, yet clearly feel its weight embedded in every space. Tsukuba Science City was not born from residential or commercial demand, but from a rare decision to build an entire city so that science could have room to breathe. From the very beginning, this place was planned as a system serving thought, not display. Hundreds of research institutes are spaced just far enough apart to remain independent, yet connected. Wide roads, low-rise architecture, and intentionally preserved open spaces all work to reduce noise and maintain a stable rhythm of thinking. Here, form matters less than intellectual function. What is unusual is that science does not stay behind laboratory doors. Robots, artificial intelligence, and experimental transportation appear in everyday life, allowing research and daily living to merge without clear boundaries. Walking through Tsukuba feels like moving inside a draft of the future. There are no iconic check-in spots, yet every street corner suggests that this city is thinking, slowly and with intention. Sydney Metro is Australia's first fully automated metro system, operating without drivers. It emerged when the city had already lived with traditional railways for more than a century, making its arrival feel like a precise urban intervention rather than a project built from scratch. Beneath the ground, tunnels were excavated through complex geological layers with deviations controlled to extremely small margins. Every element, from tunnel geometry to the aerodynamics of the trains, was calculated to reduce vibration, minimize noise, and maintain a continuous flow of movement in enclosed space. At the level of passenger use, stations do not feel rigidly technical. High ceilings, open layouts, and carefully guided light reach deep underground, turning the act of waiting into an experience closer to being inside a civic building than within transport infrastructure. Riding Sydney Metro creates a strange sensation. You do not see a driver, you do not hear constant instructions, yet everything unfolds with precision. The city seems to move by itself, while people simply step into its current. Masdar City was not created to overwhelm, but to force people to rethink how they live. This city is designed around humans rather than cars. Every space encourages walking, short-distance movement, and a slower rhythm of life. From its very structure, it rejects the conventional energy-consuming urban mindset. Here, architecture is not meant only to be seen, but to function. The form recalls ancient desert heritage, while inside are recycled materials, smart management systems, and spatial organization that reduces resource waste. Every street and building block serves a clear purpose for survival. Masdar City also acts as a social laboratory. It tests how far humans are willing to change, whether people can accept fewer conveniences in exchange for a more sustainable living environment. Walking through its quiet spaces, visitors are not drawn into shopping or entertainment. What remains is the feeling of standing before a draft of the future, where value lies not in display, but in how humans learn to live in greater harmony with the world they create. King Abdullah Economic City was not formed from villages or ancient trading ports, but from a complete blueprint designed for the future. Spanning more than 65.6 square miles, this city was built before a dense community existed, making it one of the rare, will-driven cities in the modern world. The space here carries a distinctly industrial and logistics-oriented character. Roads and infrastructure were designed for traffic volumes far greater than today, leaving vast boulevards that feel oversized, almost exceeding current human demand. Along the Red Sea, the modern landscape contrasts sharply, with deep blue waters and sandy shores still lightly touched by mass tourism. The combination of a megaport, international residential zones, and open sea creates an image that feels both cold and full of potential. What stands out most is not what has been completed, but the sensation of walking through a city still waiting to be filled, where the future is already built and people arrive as the final piece. Kansai International Airport does not sit on the mainland, but stands alone at sea on an artificial island covering more than 500 hectares. From the beginning, this airport was conceived as a bold engineering decision, completely separating air infrastructure from the city, trading ground convenience for space and operational freedom. The island's foundation rests on extremely soft marine clay, where subsidence was not a risk, but a certainty. Instead of resisting it, engineers accepted it as part of the structure's life cycle, designing adjustable support columns so the airport could continue operating as the ground slowly changed. The main terminal stretches nearly 1.06 miles, curving like the hull of a ship. Inside, airflow and light are carefully guided to keep passengers moving smoothly and reduce fatigue within such a vast space. Landing at Kansai feels like entering a quiet dialogue between humans and nature, where engineering does not boast of conquest, but reveals patience and acceptance. Al-Boraq high-speed rail is not merely a railway line, but the moment Africa stepped into the era of high-speed travel. When it began operation, this rail corridor immediately changed how people perceive distance, turning journeys that once felt long into compact trips completed within a single part of the day. What makes it distinctive is how advanced, high-speed technology is placed within a landscape marked by strong North African identity. Through the train window, the scenery unfolds smoothly and quietly, creating a sensation of gliding rather than rushing forward. Speed here does not overwhelm, but delivers an unusual sense of control and stability. Beyond infrastructure, Al-Boraq reshaped social habits. Same-day business trips, brief meetings, and short-term travel plans suddenly became realistic options. Time, in many ways, was returned to people. For travelers, this journey is not designed to excite, but to convey something subtler, the feeling of witnessing a nation confidently accelerating forward while still holding firmly to its cultural identity. Riyadh Metro appears not as a means of transportation, but as a quiet statement about how humans redefine living space. Built under complex geological conditions, this system forced engineers to rethink foundations, rails, and long-term stability, an equation few modern cities have ever had to solve. What stands out is that this metro was born in a society long accustomed to private mobility, creating enclosed public spaces where thousands share daily movement has reshaped urban behavior faster than any communication campaign could. Visually, the stations avoid the feeling of being underground. High ceilings, natural light, and abstract forms make passengers feel as if they are entering a cultural structure rather than technical infrastructure. There are moments on the train when one realizes they are inside a large-scale experiment where technology, society, and national ambition run together on an invisible set of tracks. Doha Metro was not created merely to carry people from one place to another, but to prove that a city can tell its future story beneath the ground. It is a fully automated transit system, where every movement is governed by algorithms with near absolute precision, creating a sense of order, safety, and smoothness from the very first ride. The station spaces speak the language of contemporary Islamic architecture: high ceilings, soft forms, and lighting carefully calculated to guide emotion. People are not just moving, they are passing through a space designed to calm the mind, more like a museum than public transport. Inside the train, the division of carriages clearly reflects local social structure and cultural values. Each carriage represents a different rhythm of life, yet all share the same experience: quiet, cleanliness, and strict control. Taking the Doha Metro is a way to observe a city that does not show off above ground, but quietly expresses its ambition, discipline, and long-term vision through silent movements beneath your feet. Itaipu Dam is not just a dam, but the moment humanity decided to place an exclamation mark on the natural flow of a river. A colossal concrete wall was erected to transform the chaotic movement of water into stable energy, sustaining an entire vast economic space. Behind its rough exterior lies a machine of near absolute precision. Turbines weighing hundreds of tons rotate continuously, monitored down to the smallest vibration, turning water from untamed nature into a controlled sequence of data. From a social perspective, Itaipu is the result of a rare compromise between two nations, where interests, technology, and politics are forced to operate simultaneously. This structure cannot belong to one side alone, nor can it exist without mutual trust. Standing before Itaipu, people do not find romance, but the feeling of being placed beside a massive decision, accepting the trade-off of landscape to truly grasp the real power of modern civilization. Aswan High Dam was not built to beautify the landscape, but to reclaim control over a river that had determined Egypt's fate for thousands of years. Since ancient times, life depended on natural cycles. This dam marked the moment humans deliberately altered that rule. From an engineering perspective, it is a structure large enough to create an artificial reservoir stretching hundreds of miles, storing water and generating electricity for an entire nation over many decades. It turned water power from an unpredictable force into a calculable resource. Standing on the dam, the landscape appears split into two worlds. On one side, a vast expanse of still water. On the other, arid land extending to the horizon. This contrast makes the structure feel like a decisive cut through nature. There are quiet moments when one realizes they are standing inside a historical decision, where benefits, losses, and ambition coexist side by side.